So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and people joining from UN Web TV stream, and journalists joining this press conference from the Palais des Nations in Geneva. We welcome you to the launch of the United in Science 2021 report. My name is Paul Edgerton, Chef de Cabinet of WMO, and I'll be moderating this event today. United in Science is a multi-organization, high-level compilation of the latest climate science information and is published in advance of the UN General Assembly and brings high-level climate science information at a global level, so providing a unified assessment on the state of our Earth system. This is actually the third edition of this report, and the report covers greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere from WMO, global greenhouse emissions and budgets from the Global Carbon Project, emissions gap from the United Nations Environment Programme, global climate in 2017 to 2021 and up to 2025 from the WMO UK Met Office. Also, it provides highlights of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 6th Assessment Report, the Physical Science Basis, sea level rise and coastal impacts from the World Climate Research Programme, and finally also heat waves, fires and air pollution with collaboration with the World Health Organization. So first of all, this press conference, we're very privileged to hear a message from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who will present his statement on the report.
We have reached a tipping point on the need for climate action. The disruption to our climate and our planet is already worse than we thought, and it is moving faster than predicted. Yet, we are far from meeting the goals of the 5-year-old Paris Agreement. This report shows just how far off course we are. The past 5-year period is among the hottest on record. We continue to destroy the things on which we depend for life on Earth. Ice caps and glaciers continue to melt, sea level rise is accelerating, the ocean is dying, and biodiversity is collapsing. This year, fossil fuel emissions have bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. Greenhouse gas concentrations continue to rise to new record highs, and the results are plain to see, affecting health, lives and livelihoods everywhere. We now have 5 times the number of recorded weather disasters than we had in 1970, and they are 7 times more costly. Even the most developed countries have become vulnerable. Hurricane Ida recently cut power to over 1 million people in New Orleans, and New York City was paralyzed by record-breaking rain that killed at least 50 people in the region. Unprecedented floods devastated parts of Western Europe, and an exceptional and dangerous heat wave killed hundreds in the northwest of the United States and Western Canada. These events would have been impossible without human-caused climate change. Costly fires, floods, and extreme weather events are increasing everywhere. These changes are just the beginning of worse to come. Unless there are immediate, rapid, and large-scale reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, we will be unable to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and the consequences will be catastrophic. This report by the United Nations and Global Scientific Partner Organization is clear. We really are out of time. We must act now to prevent further irreversible damage. COP26 this November must mark that turning point. By then, we need all countries to commit to achieve net zero emissions by the middle of this century and to present clear, credible, long-term strategies to get there. We need all countries to present more ambitious and achievable nationally determined contributions that will together cut global greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels. Nothing less will do. This report makes clear that our climate has already changed and the climate-related risks are increasing rapidly. It is urgent that we step up efforts to protect people and their livelihoods, particularly in the most vulnerable countries that have been hit simultaneously by climate disruption, COVID-19, and crashing levels of debt. This is why we must urgently secure a breakthrough on adaptation and resilience so that vulnerable communities can manage these growing risks. And that means adequate finance, beginning with developed countries delivering on their pledge to mobilize $100 billion annually for mitigation and adaptation in the developing world. I expect all these issues to be addressed and resolved at COP26. Our future is at stake. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to thank the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres for that statement formally united in science. I'd like to introduce you now to Professor Petteri Taalas, who is the Secretary General of the World Meterological Organization, and he will give you a presentation on the United Science Report key results. Professor Taalas.
So welcome also on my behalf, and thanks to Secretary General Guterres for his words, and he has been actually requesting us to provide these reports. The first one was published 3 years ago when he organized a high-level climate summit for the heads of states in New York, attached to the General Assembly. And thereafter we have had a habit to publish these reports on annual basis, just before the General Assembly, to motivate the heads of state who classically gather in New York to mitigate the climate change. And as Paul Egerton said, this is a joint venture of several UN agencies and also Global Carbon Project and UK Met Office. And I will now show you some slides where I will summarize what are the contents of this report. Could I get the slides up, please? Can I get the next one? I don't see it here, by the way. So, I will summarize the findings of this report a little bit later, but first there was some thinking that because of these COVID lockdowns we would have seen a positive development in real atmosphere, but that's not the case. I will now show what happened last year. Can I get the next slide, please? So this is demonstrating how the emissions have been, carbon emissions have been evolving during the past decades, and you can see that there's been a fairly steady increase, and last year we estimated that there was 5.6% drop in emissions, and since the lifetime of carbon dioxide is so long, this 1 year's anomaly in emissions doesn't change the big picture. We saw some improvements in air quality, these short-lived gases which are affecting air quality. We saw positive evolution there, but now we have returned more or less back to the 2019 emission levels. Next, please. And here are some greenhouse gas measurements, carbon dioxide measurements, first for the most recent years on the left-hand side, and you can see very steady increase, and on the right-hand side you can see the whole old time series from the late 50s when US NOAA started measurements at Mauna Loa, and this is what we measure at all of the stations because the very long lifetime of carbon dioxide. So this short drop in emissions didn't change the big picture. We should see such drops happening on annual basis to be successful in climate mitigation. Next, please. And the last 5 years period has been the warmest 5-year period on record since we started measurements in 1850. And on the map here you can see where we saw more than average warming, and that's typically Arctic area. Europe has been also exposed to higher increase of temperatures, and Asia in general. Then we see some anomalies here, especially in southern hemisphere ocean areas, and there's also one anomaly south of Greenland and Iceland, and that's related to the slowing down of so-called Gulf Stream, which is bringing warm air from Caribbean towards Europe. But overall warming in Europe and Arctic has been so massive that we don't see a major impact of that at the European continent, but in the ocean area that's happening. And we have several centers worldwide which are estimating what has happened during since 1850, and you can see a couple of European centers here, a few North American ones, and a Japanese one, and depending how you calculate this warming so far, the range is from 1.06 degrees to 1.26 degrees warming. So about 1.1 to 1.3 is the range of warming so far. In IPCC report, which was published a few weeks ago, they talked about 1.1, but here we have also data from the most recent years which were not included in the IPCC report. Next, please. And as Antonio Guterres said, we have started seeing more extreme events, and of course we have also this natural variability in atmosphere, so we cannot tell that everything that we observe is because of climate change. But for example, these two events that we are shown on the screen, they have been clearly linked to climate change. First, we had this temperature anomaly in western Canada and United States, where we were up to 15 degrees warmer temperatures than normally, and that led to record-breaking forest fires and major health problems, especially among elderly people. And also this flooding event in western Germany, that was very unusual and led also to almost 200 casualties. And because of climate change, these kind of events that used to happen every 100 years, they may happen nowadays every 20 years, and in the future even more often. So the risk of these kind of events is growing because of climate change. But we shouldn't explain all of this kind of variability with climate change factors. Next, please. And if we compare this, what has happened during the past 100 years, that's really very unusual. We can go back with not measurements but indirect ways of estimating what has happened to temperatures. We can go back 100,000 years, and the last 100 years is clearly an anomaly in that time frame. So we haven't seen such warming and such warm century for the past 100,000 years. And here I'm showing what has happened during the past 2,000 years. Next, please. And these changes, they are having also impacts on human health, and we have learned that the frequency of heat waves is growing, and especially people who have been casualties of this COVID pandemic, same type of people are also sensitive to changes in temperature patterns, and these heat wave events cause mortality, and especially these elderly and sick people who have died of COVID, they are also typically dying because of heat waves. And on the map on the right-hand side, you can see that we have seen also an increase of forest fire risk, and you can see lots of color in Asia, in Africa, and also in both Americas and also in Russia. And during recent years, we have seen record-breaking forest fires in Russia and also in Brazil and also in the United States, as I already said. Next, please. And the drought events, flooding events, and storm events by 2050, 2060, if we are successful with mitigation. But certain parameters will continue to change also during the coming hundreds of years, because we have already such high concentrations of especially carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that's why the sea level rise, melting of glaciers, and melting of snow and ice will continue for centuries. And here you can see that the estimates of sea level rise for this century, they are higher than they used to be. We estimated the range is from 0.0 to 0.6 meters besides the sea level rise, which has been about 26 centimeters so far. So altogether we are supposed to reach half meter to 1 meter by the end of this century, and then by 2300, by the end of next century, we may get up to 3 meters more. And this is an area where we have lots of uncertainty, and the uncertainty is very much related to the fact that we don't know what's going to happen to the Antarctic glacier, where we have the biggest mass of ice worldwide, and in the worst case we could see up to 2 meters sea level rise by the end of this century if the melting of the Antarctic glacier happens in a speedier manner. The good news from the recent IPCC report is that this worst scenario that we used to have in the previous reports, they are not very likely anymore. So it seems that we can somehow mitigate climate change, but so far we haven't. We are not on a track towards Paris Agreement targets. Next, please. And there's a likelihood that we would hit the low limit of Paris Agreement 1.5 degrees during the coming 5 years, and there's 40% chance that 1 year within the coming 5 years would be only 1.5 degree warmer on temporary basis. On permanent basis, that may happen much later. Next, please. And finally, I would like to say that we are not yet on track towards the Paris 1.5 to 2 degrees limits, although positive things have started to happen. And the political interest to mitigate climate change is clearly growing, but to be successful in this effort, we have to start acting now. We cannot wait for decades to act. We have to start acting already during this decade, and that's one of the challenges for the forthcoming COP26 meeting, to raise the ambition level and to be able to reach 1.5 to 2 degrees, which would be the best for the welfare of mankind and our planet. Next, please. And here we are summarizing the results of this report. So we have to raise the ambition level of mitigation, and we have started seeing events which have been unusual in the past, that they're becoming more usual because of climate change, and this anomaly in emissions last year is over, and we are more or less back to the 2019 emission levels, and this health case COVID doesn't have a very strong link to any weather patterns. The only link that we have found is related to air pollution. So the polluted areas have seen more mortality than other parts of the world. And sea level rise has been accelerating, and this will continue for centuries. And there's a chance that we would hit the low limit of Paris Agreement during the coming 5 years, and that's 40% chance for that. This was all from my side, and I'm open for questions or comments from your side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Taalas, for that detailed presentation of United in Science 2021. And as we said at the beginning, this is a cooperation with several UN agencies and academic institutions. And we just want to also thank the contributions of this report, and also the lead team with Professor Juerg Luterbacher, who is the WMO chief scientist and also is joining on the Zoom link. We're now going to ask for any questions from journalists on the press conference, and could you please raise your hand if you would wish to ask for the floor. So first of all, I'll go to the Swiss news agency, Laurent Serio, please.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. Thank you, Secretary General. You mentioned an increasing interest in climate action. When you assess what you have heard or read so far from the different member states, how do you assess the preparation for the COP? Does it seem satisfactory, or aren't you confident on what they might achieve? Is there a need for even stronger preparation for the gathering? Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. So, as I said, we have heard encouraging news. It seems that quite many countries worldwide are aiming at becoming carbon neutral by 2050 or 2060, which is the aim of China. And the good news is that we also have both the technological and financial means to be successful with climate mitigation, even theoretically reach the low limit of Paris Agreement, 1.5 degrees. But what needs to happen is that we have to start acting during this decade already. So we cannot wait for several decades to act. Otherwise, we will lose the chance to reach this Paris 1.5 to 2 degrees limits. And there's going to be lots of pressure on countries that they would make commitments for the coming 10 years to mitigate, have ambitious mitigation plans for until 2030. So that's our challenge. And so far we haven't heard enough such commitments that we would be heading towards the Paris limits. But I would say that the political interest to mitigate is higher than ever.
Thank you. Just to remind you, if you want to ask the floor, please raise your hand on the chat. We're now going to Jamie Keaton from Associated Press. Over to you, Jamie.
Good morning, Professor Taalas. Nice to see you again. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry, I had some difficulty with this the other day. I wanted to know if you could just be very specific. Obviously, this is a compilation of a lot of different science that has been out there already. I'm just wondering, in terms of the projections, what specifically is new in this report compared to the IPCC report, or is it really just more of a sort of assessing that data? And then the second question just has to do with what you just touched upon. How optimistic are you that countries are going to be able to get their act together between now and 2030 to help meet the Paris targets?
Yes, so IPCC reports, these main reports, they are published typically every 7 years, and they are dealing with peer-reviewed literature, which has been published in the peer-reviewed journals during the past years, and in this report we are also including what we have observed during the recent years. The IPCC report information is typically lagging at least couple of years behind what's happening in real atmosphere. And in this report we are summarizing what has happened in the real atmosphere, and for example we have estimated what has been the impact of emission drops during these pandemic lockdowns. We have also estimated what has been the contribution of climate change, the most recent disasters like the forest fires in Canada and USA, and flooding event in Germany, and then we have also estimated what is the likelihood that we would hit the lower limit of Paris Agreement, and then we have of course also information on greenhouse gases until this year, and also information on temperature changes until this year, which wasn't the case in IPCC report. So that's a thing, and we are very much echoing the same message as IPCC report, and there were some thinking that the COVID lockdown would have had positive impact on the real atmosphere, which is not the case. And as I already said, the bottleneck of the COP26, one of them is going to be how much we are ready to start acting already during this decade. There's been classically thinking that perhaps in the future something may happen, but it's obvious that we have to start acting already now if we want to reach the lower limit of Paris Agreement, and this is one of the challenges that both the UK government and we at the United Nations are elaborating and encouraging countries to raise their ambition level. So now we are heading towards 2 to 3 degrees warming instead of 1.5 to 2 degrees, and it has been shown clearly that it would be beneficial for the welfare of us human beings and welfare of the biosphere and the planet to reach even the lower limit of Paris Agreement 1.5 degrees.
Thank you very much, Professor Taalas, for that answer. I just wanted to ask, anybody else want to ask any further questions? Again, I go back, I think, to Laurent from Swiss News Agency. You want to come back on a question, Laurent?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you believe that the multiplying prevalence of fires and floodings in the last 2 years in the middle of the pandemic contributed to that growing consciousness from member states? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. We were a little bit afraid that this pandemic would have been shadowing the even bigger problem, long-term problem, climate change. And it's important to compare COVID crisis and the risk related to climate change. Because of COVID, we had very dramatic impacts on our everyday life and all these lockdowns and so forth. And with to be successful in climate mitigation, we would need changes in our everyday life which wouldn't be very dramatic. They would be actually fairly moderate, and but if we fail with climate mitigation, we would have a permanent problem for at least hundreds or even thousands of years, and both the economic and human well-being effects would be much more dramatic than this COVID pandemic, which has been hitting us all in a dramatic way. So that's something to keep in mind. But the good news is that despite of this attention to pandemic, countries have come out with more ambitious plans to mitigate. That's the case in European Union, USA, G7 countries in general, including Japan. China has come out with ambitious plans, and also fossil fuel dependent economies like Saudi Arabia and Russia have also indicated that they would like to aim at becoming carbon neutral by 2050. So this is very positive news, but we have to speed up these mitigation efforts to be successful.
Thank you very much for those questions. It doesn't appear we have any more questions from the floor. So I'd like to thank all of the journalists and everyone following on UN Web TV for this live stream event on the United Science 2021. The report will be available on the WMO website, and we also would thank our partners of United in Science. The report will also be brought into the discussions with world leaders with the UN Secretary General in advance of the General Assembly, and we also hope to use the results of this as we move in towards COP26 Glasgow meeting in early November. So thank you very much for joining this morning, and we wish you a nice day. Thank you.